Welcome to the WanderLearn podcast. I'm your host, Francis Tapon. In this episode, I will be interviewing Jennifer Peedom. In 2019, Free Solo, the documentary movie, won the Academy Award for the Best Documentary. When Mountain came out a couple of years ago, it should have won that award because it's just as amazing of a movie as a documentary. It really blows you away. It's free on Netflix. You can get it for $4 to rent it on YouTube. You must see it. It's truly a dramatic movie. And after you watch it, you can listen to this interview, although you can also listen to this interview with her beforehand. She gives you all the background information about how the movie was made, which I found fascinating. And the interview was taking place while she was in Australia, and so we did it over the computer, and the audio quality is subpar, but at least the content is truly informative. So I hope you enjoy it. Hope you also support my Patreon at patreon.com/ftapon. Enjoy this interview with Jennifer Peedom. Welcome to the WanderLearn podcast. It's Francis Tapon. I'm here with Jennifer Peedom. You made this amazing, probably one of the most amazing documentaries I've seen, and it's simply called Mountain. And I saw it when I was surfing through Netflix, and they recommended it, and I was just blown away. So I said, I must talk to Jennifer and find out how she went about making this amazing documentary. I really recommend it. Tell us quickly about what's the documentary about? I mean, it's Mountain, and it's pretty much a great title because that's pretty much what it's about.
Yeah, look, it's a movie that explores, I think, the human fascination to mountains. What is it that causes some of us to risk our lives for this thing that can't really love us back? So it was an interesting gestation, the project. It actually came to me as an idea from the Australian Chamber Orchestra, who are one of the greatest chamber orchestras in the world, and they are known for these really unusual collaborations. And they had done a surf movie actually, and they had seen some of my films and asked me to collaborate on a project about mountains. So the idea actually came from them. But in my history, I had, of course, spent quite a lot of time in the mountains. So I had worked as a climbing camera operator on Everest expeditions, and I'd made quite a few films in the adventure space before. And so I guess it was just a good fit. And so the project is therefore very driven by music because it actually began life as a concert piece. And at a certain point in that process, the creative development process, I decided that, I'm a filmmaker. So I wanted to make a film. And so we kind of then had two aims. It was to have this extraordinary performance piece. So the orchestra performs live to the movie, but it's not like a, Star Wars with the London Symphony playing to it. It's very much designed as a concert. So it's very different to anything I had made before. It's very different to most documentaries because it's a little bit like going to a concert, actually. So the music is very front and center. The cinematography is very front and center. And then we have this very sparse narration that kind of ties all of the ideas together, and it's written by a wonderful British writer called Robert Macfarlane, and yes. he wrote this book called Mountains of the Mind, which is one of the great books. When I was climbing, when I was in my 20s and I was climbing a lot, that was a book that was a really important inspirational book for me because it kind of helped explain that urge. What is it that fascinates us about mountains? What is it that draws us to mountains? And his book sort of explores that, what he calls revolution of perception. So how is it that, only 200 years ago, we feared mountains and believed that they were the domains of gods and monsters, and yet here we are now with this totally different relationship. So his book explores that. And so in many ways that became the arc for the film. And then, of course, we had to find an amazing voice to narrate that. And one of my favourite actors is Willem Dafoe. And so we asked him to do it, and so he became the voice of the movie, and he has this wonderful craggy voice, but he very much, I think, liked the ideas that we were expressing in the film. So that's how it all came together.
It's a fantastic. You're bringing those three elements together so beautifully. The writing, the cinematography, and the music just merge so brilliantly. Now, you picked William Dafoe, as a writer. One thing that always fascinates me about Hollywood is when they're making movies like Toy Story, or you're just doing a documentary. Why is it so important to get these kind of well-known stars like a Tom Hanks or somebody like that to narrate? When you don't even see their face, it seems like you could get some voiceover actor who's got an amazing voice, and yet we need these people that are actors who are known for their visual face as well. Why is that so important? Why can't we just save some money? I mean, because I imagine Defoe is not cheap, and so you probably.
Well, he was very generous, and he was very generous, actually. It's marketing, absolutely. But it's partly, there's something about, like, when you choose an actor like that, their body of work embodies a lot of ideas, right? So Willem Dafoe is an actor that, if you think about his career, he's taken a lot of risks. He's done big mainstream movies, but he survived as an independent filmmaker as well. Like, so he crosses over, he works with really interesting, challenging directors. And that to me was really important, because this is a film about risk taking, about why we take these risks. And I think I needed whoever it was to deeply understand that idea. So I think it's kind of like good casting. They say in movie making, casting is everything. Casting is 80%, and so it is true. And it's one of those things that's hard to grab hold of, but they're important choices. And, we were kind of on some voices.com thing, listening to a bunch of voices, and just nothing, I didn't believe it, and there's a reason that these actors are very successful, because they can do something, they can really make magic. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it did. That definitely did. Now, you talked about how that 80% rule, that applies, I think, to fiction movies, but when you're dealing with a documentary, 80% is not casting, right? Because you're not really casting anybody.
No, and in this film even more, because as you know from seeing it, there are no characters. I mean, there are some characters, we never get to know them, we never hear them speak, except for one exception where there's a climber in real pain and he begs to be taken home. That's about the only piece of dialogue in the movie.
And we don't even know who that climber is, I don't think.
That's right. I mean, I know who he is, but
he's not identified, right?
The audience doesn't know. And so we had an even harder job, because, I mean, when I think about my other films, so for example, Sherpa, I think one of the reasons that feature docs are doing so incredibly well now at the box office is that, non-fiction filmmakers are realizing that in non-fiction too, casting is everything. Characters are so important. And I think I'm very much a filmmaker that believes in those rules of, story and structure and character arcs. And I do that in my non-fiction filmmaking. In a film like this, it was so much harder because the mountains were the characters. Right. And so the mountains themselves needed to have an arc. And in the end, that became our relationship with the mountains, and how that's changed over time and where it sits now. And if we listen, what mountains can teach us and those kinds of things. So it was a really hard film to make in that respect, because you didn't have all the normal tools at your disposal.
Right. So Jennifer, you had one of your partners in the process was Renan Öztürk, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He had about 17 hours worth of beautiful mountain footage or more that he kind of said, okay, here's a body of work. We can edit this. And then my question is, what percentage of the mountain movie was Renan's footage that he brought to the table? What percentage that you grabbed from elsewhere? For example, there was one moment there I see Alex Honnold, who's on Half Dome, and he's kind of standing on the edge. I don't think either one of you filmed that. I could be wrong.
Yeah, Renan filmed that.
Okay, great. So maybe there's...
It's about 60% Renan's footage.
Okay.
And then there's about another fairly large percentage. So that was footage that either Renan and I shot together. We'd shot together in the Himalayas. It was stuff that he had already already shot and was sitting there, had been used a tiny bit, might have been used for another project, but most of it had never been seen before. And there were some instances, for example, that Highline Walker in not Yosemite, in Utah, that was shot during the making of the film. He said, listen, is this something you're interested in? And of course I was, so he went and shot it. So there was that. We kind of had a variety of different ways of working together. See, Renan spends most of his life on expeditions, and he shoots these expeditions and then has got little time to make films about it because he's on the next expedition or on a climbing job. And so he had this incredible library of footage that just wasn't being used. And I got to know him on Sherpa. So he was my cinematographer on Sherpa. And I knew about this project then. And so we spent a lot of time at base camp talking about it. And he was really interested in the ideas that it was exploring, but also that it was a collaboration with an orchestra. So he had grown up, his mother was a classical flute player, flautist. And so he was really interested just in what we were trying to achieve with a film like this, that it be designed as a live performance piece, but also work as a standalone movie. So that's how he came to be involved. And then there were some other guys, a really amazing Canadian outfit called Sherpa's Cinema. So you'd see them in the credits as well, in the opening credits. Renan frequently collaborates with them, and I'd seen a lot of their work and loved it. Okay. And so he made an introduction to those guys. Same thing for them. They shoot a lot of commercial work. They do a lot of the amazing skiing stuff, snowboarding stuff. So whereas Renan's more climbing, they're more skiing, snowboarding, lots of helicopters, amazing work, amazing work. And they shoot lots of beautiful visual metaphors. And so Renan introduced me to those guys. And so I, then set up a similar relationship. They allowed me into I went up to Whistler in Canada and sat in their production office on their edit suites for days and days and just pulled down footage that we wanted to use. Again, a lot of which had never been used. So we got the rushes, as you call them, from these shoots. And if they had been used before, they hadn't been used in this way, not with this music.
Right.
So it was...
but I have a question. How is it that you distill? This is the challenge for me, is I'm trying to grasp, because I know how it's like to have like 100 hours of footage and you got to squeeze it down into just a 1 or 2 hour documentary.
We probably had 1,000 hours of footage.
Even worse, yeah. Right? So all the more, you're just making my point. What is your process, your methodology, your way of thinking, Jennifer, that you distill this 1,000 hours down to an hour or two?
You need to find your structure. You need to figure out what it is you're trying to say. You need to, what I say, beat out. Like, you need to really understand what's my first act, what's happening in the second act, and what's the, what is the third act? How am I going to finish this thing? And you kind of write that. And so we were working with Robert Macfarlane, the writer, figuring out the structure. And then once you find the structure, you can start to say, okay, well, these images really represent that idea. And these images, like if we're looking at the human relationship to mountain, of course, so we needed black and white archive. We wanted to do a little section that kind of showed that transition and then brought us up to today. So it's about, rather than just starting to whittle away, you have to think about story first, then footage, then.
So Jennifer, you tell me if I'm reading you right here. You started off with this basically a rough script, or maybe a very strong script, where you got Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and you got a broad overview of the storyline. Part 2, you gather the footage, and that kind of works in with a storyline. And part 3 is you integrate the music. Is that the sequence, or does the music come before the video, or kind of at the same time, or it's a mess?
No, sometimes the music comes first. You think, okay, this is a great piece of music. We're setting out. We want to send off our adventurers on their way. Okay, what music is going to work for that? You kind of have an idea of what kind of footage you're going to use. Then you might bring in the music. Other times, so sometimes the music led, other times the music came right at the very end.
I wanted to know about the marketing aspect of films, and this is kind of like all artists face this quandary. They're obsessed about the art and the development of the art, but then they are disappointed when they realize that, my God, most of the real work is the marketing aspect and getting the word out.
Yeah.
And oftentimes artists are not good at doing that. So you've done at least three major documentaries, Sherpa, Solo, and Mountain. What did you learn from shooting that? And as far as marketing specifically, what has worked for you? What hasn't worked for you?
Okay, well, the number one thing is to make a really good movie. Okay, because then people want to see it. And what I have discovered is word of mouth is the most powerful marketing tool. So, you know, it really comes with having a very careful festival strategy, because depending on what festivals you get into, that can totally determine the success or otherwise of the project. So if you really manage the festival process well, and when you get to a certain level, there are people for that. So there are sales agents and agents that work really closely with you to make sure that you get into those A-list festivals. So, for example, Sherpa got into Telluride Film Festival and Toronto Film Festival, which really then gave it a really great kickstart to life, if you know what I mean. So Mountain had its world premiere because it was a very different concert, its world premiere, and because it had been commissioned by the Australian Chamber Orchestra, it began life as a concert at the Sydney Opera House in that magnificent building on the harbour there. So it was a very beautiful kind of massive event. And then it went and did the international festivals. So it did San Sebastian and London and a host of others. So having a sales agent then that can, talk to people like Netflix, which is how you then saw the movie. So they do all of those deals for you and that kind of thing. And usually at a certain point with Sherpa, we were doing, an awards run. So we got a BAFTA nomination in the end, not an Oscar one, unfortunately. But there are publicists that work with you. I mean, it's a huge amount of work. And I find that really difficult, particularly with a film like Sherpa where, people had died, Sherpas had died. And, here we were spending, we could have spent, you can spend up to $1 million marketing a film, a feature documentary for an Academy campaign, if not more, because the whole Academy now votes for feature doc. And so you can spend a lot of money. So you need very big backers to do that. And to be honest, that felt really uncomfortable to me with a film like Sherpa. So we spent quite a lot of time with our Australian release doing a lot of fundraising, and we've used that movie all over the world. We've allowed it to be screened at different community things where the people have raised money for the Sherpa community. So yeah, it's a quandary. If you're really going for those big awards, you need to pretty much put aside, at least 6 to 9 months of your life and just work full time on that, which is very difficult for a filmmaker who just wants to make films. And keep in mind, you're not getting paid when you do that work.
Right.
So it's an investment in your career, but it's not paid work. So you're constantly on an airplane going somewhere. And, I think with Mountain, I've been overseas about 7 times this year. I've got one more overseas trip to go. With Sherpa, it was about the same. It was just an insane amount of travel. So, that's tough. But, it's an investment in your career. So you just have to manage it carefully and know the ones to say yes to and know the ones to say no to.
What would you say is a common mistake that a novice documentary filmmaker usually make and that they shouldn't make? I imagine marketing is one of them, that they underestimate that they're going to have to spend 7 months of their life after they finish the film to do it. I think another one might be that they think that if they just get a distribution deal with Netflix or whatever, then they're done. They're like, yay, I'm finished.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the end, it comes back to what I said at the beginning. If you make a really good film, people will gather around you to help you with that stuff because there's money to be made if you've made a good film. Going right back to making the film in the first place, I think the error that I see a lot with people making documentary films is that they don't think about it as a movie to start with. They think about it as a documentary, whatever that means. And so they go into the field and they just shoot everything. And they don't necessarily know what the story is. See, with Sherpa, we were shooting the movie, and in the middle of, which was to follow an Everest expedition from the Sherpa's point of view. And then an avalanche came and killed 16 Sherpas. And so obviously we had to pivot. But because we'd done so much thinking about story before, we were able to pivot. And so I think that's my advice, is to watch other movies, watch other documentaries, but also movies, and think, what is this kind of film? Is it a buddy movie? Is it a quest film? Is it a romantic comedy? You need to think about documentaries as movies as well as just being documentaries, and know what it is you're trying to say before you walk out the door and spend a whole lot of money on shooting something.
Very good. How have you, Jennifer, evolved from your, going from Sherpa, solo, and then mountain? How have you changed as a documentary filmmaker? What have you really, I guess, proud of having grown in a certain way?
I think probably the thing is that I've really learnt to be a better storyteller, to really think clearly about planning my films, really understanding my own voice, understanding what it is that I want to say. The other part of it is becoming more ambitious. As people grow in confidence, then you can afford bigger crews, more cameras, more time in the edit, all of those things, better music. And so you just evolve in that way, but you have to start small. Well, you don't necessarily need to start small. You could, some people make a brilliant movie their first movie. For me, it's been just doing work. It's just been working on a lot of projects. I've done, as you said, 3 big feature docs, but I've done a lot of television. So I spent a lot of time being a filmmaker. I've learned to become a very good interviewer, very good listener. And then I've just learned to really get good at story, I think, is the thing that I'm still practicing,
Well, when you say good interviewer, what specifically, have you improved in your interviewing technique? When you're saying good listener, obviously you want to be a good listener, but any specific tips that you could help people become better at interviewing other people and listening better?
Yeah, I mean, the number one golden rule in documentary is, if you're not going to be in the movie yourself, is that you have to learn to respond with your face, because you can't talk over people. So in a normal conversation, you and I go, oh, yeah, yeah, and you cross over like this, but you can't do that if you don't want to be in the movie. And I'm always surprised when I see young filmmakers, they're going, uh-huh, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so you can't use any of it, because it's they're talking all over the top of it. And they answer the questions for the people, or they don't listen to the answer and they read their questions. So sitting there and the person is looking at the top of their head while they're reading their next question. That is kryptonite. You can't do that. You have to, I plan my interviews very well. I write them down. I structure them. I understand how that particular person fits into the story, exactly what I need to get out of the interview. I plan it. I write every single question. And then when it comes to being in the interview, I don't look at it once. So I might have an iPad on my lap, and it's all about eye contact. So you absolutely, and so then if somebody says something unexpected, you don't need to go to the next question on your list. You go, oh, wow, let's go this way. Right. And that's happened to me. So if you're ready for it, if you're planned and you're really prepared and you understand what this person means to the film and what role they're playing in the film, then, you've cast them, then, you can then just intuitively know and follow the interview in the direction it goes. And then at a certain point when you feel like you're done, you can look down at your questions and go, oh, I forgot this one, But I think that'd be the big thing, is to learn the interview, understand what the character is doing in the film. Then you don't need to sit there and read your questions.
What's next for Jennifer Peedom?
I have lots of... I'm doing this fun little commercial project at the moment. I'm doing a little bit of advertising commercial work, and I've also got 2 features in development, not documentaries, but dramas. So I'm kind of, looking to make that transition. I mean, I think my first love will always be feature documentary, but I think I'm finding that you can be limited by the genre. So I'm trying to break down those barriers and work across genres a little bit more. So yeah, it's good fun.
How can somebody who's, let's say, listening to this or watching this, how can they help make Mountain a success? I mean, it feels like when I watch it on Netflix, I'm not really doing anything for you, but maybe you're getting like 10 cents.
No, that's not how it works. They, yeah, look, I think the better it does on Netflix, the more likely they are to buy the next one. We're talking about a sequel, actually. We're talking about a movie called River. Um, and look, it's all good. I think it's a fun movie to watch. It's a really different kind of film. It's kind of not even really a documentary. It's like a concert movie in a weird kind of way, with a lot of thrill seeking and adventure and some incredible footage and people doing insane things. But it also has a really powerful message about the environment and humility and things like that. So I would just encourage people to watch it. And I think my other movie, Sherpa, is I think maybe it's on Amazon or something. I'm not quite sure in the States. I don't think it's on Netflix because it was a Discovery Channel acquisition. But watch the film, enjoy it, and that's yeah.
But so
And
when
go out.
when Netflix actually does a deal with you, they just give you a flat fee. They don't give you per view any kind of stream. It's like it does very well. They just give you a flat
It's a
fee.
flat fee. But we'd
Okay.
already done like a theatrical release in the United States. It had been in cinemas. We've been in cinemas all over the world. So this was now its online life. In Australia, I think it's on iTunes, not Netflix because of the deals. But most of the world, it's on Netflix now. So it's done the cinema and now it's doing its second phase of life.
Wow, that's exciting. No, but it's a fantastic movie. I really was amazed by it, and I think for the beginning, I mean, it's kind of a movie that is it's kind of at the beginning kind of nice and slow. You kind of sink into it with the music and everything like that, as opposed to kind of like this hard, fast fitting. The fastest part of the movie, which is probably like the snowboard skiing section, you kind of place that in the middle. So kind of like instead of shooting for a crescendo there, you kind of place that fast section in the middle, I would say. I mean, that was strategic, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, that was all part of the structure of the thing, because you have to set up the big idea at the beginning. And also, we wanted to really set a tone with this film, that it was not, watching a normal film. This is a film that's a collaboration with an orchestra.
Yeah.
And so, we wanted people to sink into it and then ramp things up
Yeah.
and take them on a really exciting ride.
You did a brilliant job. Congratulations to you and your whole crew. You guys, A+ job. I highly recommend everybody to go out and see it. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for your time, and I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. You're a filmmaker to watch.
Thank you so much.
Okay. And that concludes this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel technology and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we talked about, or if you'd like to comment on the show, or if you'd like to ask me a question, then go to wanderlearn.com and click on the latest episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember Tapon. That's my first initial and my last name. Tapon is the username I use on all social media. You can also get to my website by going to ftapon.com. Here's one last reason to remember Tapon. If you like what I do and want to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ yep, you guessed it, ftapon. That's where you can pick up some sweet rewards for as little as $1 a month. And remember, subscribing to the WanderLearn podcast helps, but downloading each episode helps even more. Please share the podcast, review it, and sign up for my newsletter at wanderlearn.com. This show was edited by Rejoice Tapon. The music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.